What's going on, guys? RBG here, bringing you more coverage on Spider-Man Miles Morales. Yesterday, Game Informer uploaded another clip consisting of gameplay along with a semi-interview with the creative director going more into details on how Miles will develop as a character with his newly found spider powers. I know everyone has been doing these debates comparing Miles to Peter in terms of who's more effective in certain areas, and I just want to clarify the statement that I made in the last video. I mentioned how this game had a strong overtone of being yourself or being greater, and how Miles could essentially be a greater Spider-Man than Peter Parker if he simply stopped trying to mimic him and do his own thing. I noticed a lot of you were a bit thrown off by that statement, with some of you saying that Miles will never be greater than Peter, which I agree. Peter will always be the best Spider-Man no matter which incarnation he's derived from. What I meant to say was that Miles can be greater than Peter's Spider-Man in certain areas. Besides the usual spider powers, they obviously feature specific abilities that make them different. One of the main key differences being the experience. Based on the footage we've seen up to this point, Miles has more moments of self-doubt in his abilities as Spider-Man, which is probably due to the legacy of Peter Parker before him. We see multiple instances of him being reluctant of jumping into action because he knows he could potentially make matters worse. He has a weaker spider sense since the spiders that him and Peter were bitten by were most likely genetically engineered differently. And to be fair, it's never really stated whether the spider that Peter was bitten by came from Oscorp like Miles the spider did, but I think it's safe to assume that it is because Insomniac brought a lot of story elements from the Ultimate Spider-Man comics. So Miles was probably bitten by a more enhanced spider that just so happens to be carrying the Oz formula we'll most likely be hearing about in the future. And the creative director Brian Horton just so happened to expand on this in the latest interview. He mentions that they wanted to tell a coming-of-age story as opposed to throwing the player into the shoes of someone with experience, which is why the video was entitled Witness the Birth of a Hero, because we're essentially seeing an all different story of someone becoming Spider-Man. And although the writers are borrowing from the comics, they're still going in their own direction. Brian Horton says, and I quote, "Those who played the 2018 release know that Insomniac isn't trying to retell well-worn comic stories. The company is excited to put its own twist on popular characters and comic moments. We always start with the comics. That is the sort of home base to go back to the comics, go back to where it started. Vice President and head of creative at Marvel Games Bill Roseman always says, try stuff. Find ways to take these characters in new directions. As long as they don't break, you can stretch them and twist them, and then it becomes interesting." So there is an awesome Insomniac flavor to this story. One big example of how Insomniac changed Miles' backstory has to do with his father. In Insomniac's universe, Miles' father is an NYPD officer named Jefferson Davis, who briefly teams up with Spider-Man Peter to investigate the criminal organization led by Mr. Negative. Unfortunately, Davis is later killed during a political rally. This never happened in the comics, but Insomniac wants to continue to explore the repercussions of this event and show how Miles is pressed forward after the death of his father. That changed the whole trajectory of Miles' life, but Miles isn't motivated by that death. He's motivated by different things. His mentor Peter Parker, he looks up to him. And he has his mom who is running for city council that he looks up to. He has a different sort of motivation to be a Spider-Man. So as you hear this version of Miles, while similar to his counterpart of Earth 1610, is somewhat different. It seems like ever since he's made his transition into mainstream media, the writers have found a way to change his backstory, particularly with the tragedies that happened to affect his motivations. In his original comic book origins, it was his mother Rio Morales who was killed after accidentally being shot. In the Into the Spider-Verse film, they changed it up completely by sparing both his parents and opting to kill his uncle Aaron Davis, aka the Prowler, instead. And as the creative director mentioned, Insomniac chose to kill off his father Jefferson Davis in the game. That was something that instantly caught my attention because anything goes now. Certain characters in his personal life are going to have a different effect on his motivations than they did in the comics. We're already seeing how he's handling being raised by a single mom as opposed to a single dad. And he's still got ties to Norman Osborn because, as we know, it was Norman who Mr. Negative was really trying to kill instead of his father. So we could potentially see that story manifest in some form or another. There's just so many directions the creative writers at Insomniac can go in. Like, one of the most asked questions seems to be when Miles' Uncle Aaron will appear in this universe, and how he'll react in response to Osborn having his brother Jefferson killed. So many plot threads, man. But anyways, the director mentions that they wanted to make sure we saw Miles discover all of his powers on screen, which I'm very excited about. Like, I thought they were going to do something like a post-time skip where they say that he discovers stuff like his bioelectric powers between the events of the DLC in this game, and quite honestly, this would have made things a little too easy if Miles started off with these powers. He already seems like he's going to be the kitchen sink when it comes to abilities, which is why the devs opted to only give him 4 slots on his gadget's wheel as opposed to 8 like Peter had in the original game. I suspected that he would have the Venom Blast available off the rips since we saw him use it during the demo at the PS5 showcase chasing in the opening mission, but according to the director, he'll discover these powers during the first mission when his back is against the wall. Something I love is how much detail we're getting based solely on this one mission. Like, it's crazy how we've been able to pick this thing apart, and we've only seen a total of 8 minutes of footage from Game Informer. So if you're worried about this game being significantly shorter than the first or being nothing more than a glorified expansion, then this should put the worries to rest. But as you can see, Rhino has somehow managed to give Peter the beats by Dre. When we first saw this fight, we thought it started out with Miles fighting the Rhino while Peter took care of matters elsewhere, but judging by Miles talking on his earpiece, it looks like Peter brought the danger to him. Just want to briefly point out that this instance may lead to Peter upgrading to his new Spider-Man suit in the future game, because as you can see, his advanced suit has sustained quite the amount of damage. We also get a sense of how powerful this new graphics engine is compared to the first one, since the textures have been improved. I wouldn't be surprised if Spider-Man Miles Morales has actual in-game battle damage. We already saw a glimpse of Miles' suit burning away in real time as he tries to contain what looks to be new form, which seems to react negatively to his bioelectric powers. And it looks like Rhino is going to also have a negative reaction to the Venom Blast, since we see him getting severely damaged by Miles and the electric power generators that he accidentally rams into. I know many of you were asking how Peter could allow Rhino to get the upper hand on him since he's defeated him multiple times in the past, and I'm assuming it's because he was distracted by Miles in some kind of way, because as we've seen in various instances, Miles is going to be a screw up until he masters his abilities and his own unique style as Spider-Man. But yeah, it looks like Peter is out of it and will most likely be out of it for quite a while, because I remember reading that even though he defeated Rhino during the first battle, it still took him a couple of weeks to recover even with his healing factor. So he's going to be traveling to Symkaria with a couple of bruises. From what I've read, the devs say that most of the damage was sustained from an explosion after Rhino rammed into a gas tank. And the director states that this incident is going to make Miles go SSJ2 and discover his Venom Blast powers to defeat the Rhino. And it's with this discovery that Miles is going to realize that his version of Spider-Man can be different to that of Peter's. I mentioned in the previous video how this fight referenced classic games like the 2000 Spider-Man and Ultimate Spider-Man Rhino boss fights, but many of you reminded me that I forgot to mention the mission from Web of Shadows where you ride Rhino's back in the prison, which I totally forgot about, so kudos to you guys. I also wanted to point out a reference to the first Marvel Spider-Man game. If you notice during this QuickTime event where Rhino attempts to punch Miles, it's a direct callback to where Rhino tries to punch Peter, but Peter blocks it before getting tail whipped by Scorpion. There's probably some other details that I may have missed, but I'm pretty sure I'll see them in the next video Game Informer drops. Andrew Reiner, who's the chief editor, has stated that we've only seen a fraction of all the footage they have. I believe he mentioned that they have a little over 40 minutes of footage to show, and so far we've only gotten around 7 to 8 minutes worth of it. There's also going to be a video of the full interview with the creative director, and you already know it's going to be filled with juicy details, so definitely be on the lookout for my breakdown on that. But while you wait, why not subscribe to stay updated? Or better yet, leave a comment on the current breakdown I provided for you guys today. What do you think of these new details? Do you like how it's retelling the origins of Miles? Let me know in the comments below. As always, I ask you like or dislike the video. It doesn't have to be a thumbs up, it can be a thumbs down. Any feedback is good feedback and will only help me improve on future content. But if you really enjoyed the video, it would help me out tremendously if you shared it with all your friends and followers on social media outlets. Sharing really makes a difference. But once again, this is your boy RBG signing out on another video. I'll catch you guys later. Peace out.